Today, we're gonna look at 4 different types of paper. Everyone keeps saying paper's a big deal, so we're gonna figure out and put it to the test to see if they're right. First up, the cheap stuff. This is what would be considered a student grade paper. It's not 100% cotton. It's made of wood pulp and cotton fibers mixed together. But this cellulose material does mean that the paint and water is going to be absorbed slightly different than it would on 100% cotton. Next, we have a slightly more upgraded version. This guy right here. You can find him on Amazon, and he's 100% cotton, so he's a step above the Canson, would be considered a professional grade, but not as expensive as the really big name brands. Number 3, one of the big guys, Arches. This guy comes with a pretty hefty price tag, but he's supposed to be really, really good. I don't know, we'll find out. He's 100% cotton like the one from Amazon, and like the other two, 140-pound grade. We'll see. And last but not least, we have another Arches, but this one is hot pressed. Also 100% cotton and 140-pound grade. This texture is very different than cold press, so we're gonna experiment, see what the differences are. Okay, to get started, I went ahead and cut those 9x12 sheets of paper into 5x7s. I think that's a really good idea and a great way to make your paper last longer. You get at least 2 sheets of these out of it, plus the perfect sizes left over for bookmarks. Win-win. This one right here is the Canson. This is the cellulose product that is not 100% cotton. As I'm trying to show you with the light, you can see that there's a little texture to this. The texture on watercolor paper is technically referred to as the tooth of the paper. There's various definitions of that, or I guess I should say various sizes. There's some that are more rough and more pronounced, and there's others that are more smooth. We'll see a little variation as we look at those papers today. So Canson, right here. Next up, we have the one from Amazon. And if you look closely, you can see there's a texture there as well. But if I compare the two side by side, there's the Canson, here's the Amazon. But what's interesting is these papers don't feel the same. This one has a really silky smooth texture on the back. It almost loses all of its tooth, where this one on the back still has some texture. I'm guessing that has something to do with the 100% cotton. I don't know, but it's already one difference that I noticed. Next up is going to be the cold press Arches. This paper, you can see the texture pretty significantly here. It's a little rougher. The tooth is a little bit more pronounced, even if the camera's not picking it up. But one thing that I noticed that's different is it feels different in my hand. It feels more, I don't know, just hardy, like it's gonna hold up a little bit better, and versus these guys. I wouldn't say that it's less flimsy. I think, well, actually, you can't hear anything, but then if I do, can you hear that? I don't know if the camera's gonna pick that up, but we'll find out when I go back and listen. So this guy's, it's just a little stiffer. And last but not least, we have the hot press paper. Now, if you can tell, there's really no texture to this at all. In fact, the tooth of the paper is almost non-detectable. That's because this is hot pressed. I don't really know how the hot press versus the cold press does that, but it is a much smoother surface. And from what I've read, because I've never really worked with hot press before, the paint sits on here very differently. And this is a good choice of paper to use if you're wanting to get super detailed. In fact, I've seen some watercolor images done on hot press paper that almost look exactly like a photograph. Okay, now it's time to test these babies out. I grabbed my bookmark sizes so that I'm not wasting paper, and I'm gonna go ahead and swash some color washes on each of these and see how they receive the paint. Okay, so now let's do a comparison of all 4 paper. Already off the bat, I'm gonna say I noticed something on this side of the screen. Do you see how this is curving up and creating that shadow? And this is kind of curving this direction. And these guys are laying pretty flat. That already tells me something about the quality of the paper. 140-pound grade, you're supposed to be preventing warping. But here, with just this little bit of paint, we're already seeing that the two cheaper versions are having a little bit of a bigger reaction to the water than the arches. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at how each one absorbed the paint. All right, I'm having to do a voiceover right now because I just talk too much. And so I was like, we got to shorten this up. But anyway, if you look at the paper, you can notice at the top, the pink, it still looks wet. I'm pointing at the center there where you might have seen the sheen. This was really interesting because none of the other papers at this point were still wet. So I think that's kind of telling a little bit. When we look at the next one here, the one from Amazon, there is a slight sheen at the top, and I think I'm going to point that out here in a second. But you can also see that the colors dried a little more smoothly. The Canson had a little bit of a cauliflower look, at least on the pink one, whereas this one is a lot smoother and even darker in how it received the color, I think, overall. Now we're at the Arches cold press, and these colors are a little bit smoother. They don't have quite as harsh of lines. The top pink, even though it went on the same as everything else, it kind of blended together. So there's a little bit of a gradient there where you can see a darker color on the top left, but it still blended out really smoothly, which is part of the beauty of watercolor. You want that transparency or that fluency within the colors, and I feel like this paper absorbed the colors really well and would lend itself nicely to like blending and creating those beautiful gradient sunsets and things like that. Okay, now looking at the hot press, we can see that the colors dried very differently here. There's some harsh lines, especially in the pink and the teal. That would be what we call a bloom or a cauliflower, where the water consistency was just a little bit too much and it forced the paper to dry with some edges to it. So hot press, maybe not good for loose paint, but if you're looking for that detail, as we already said, it's probably a good choice. Okay, so now I'm just holding everything up so you can get a better comparison, and I'm going to do each of them side by side. But then after this, I'm going to try lifting the colors off of this paper and see how well they lift or how well they hold the color and see the differences. I think it'll be really telling. Okay, so to begin lifting, we want to get a clean brush with some clean water, and you're just going to go ahead and get your brush damp, and you're going to come and gently start painting over the color. You can already see that the color is beginning to dissipate. You just kind of dab your paintbrush on a paper towel and get it wet again, and you can actually lift the color just by using your brush. And if you want to get the edges a bit more, then you come back with a paper towel and lift it up. That lifted really nicely. Let's go ahead and get this on hyper speed and do the rest of them. Here they are side by side, and I don't know about you, but I already learned quite a bit. First off, the Canson allowed you to remove the paint way easier than the 100% cotton. All three of these held onto the paint more than the Canson. Pro to that would be if you make a mistake, this is much easier to lift. Con to that is if you're trying to build layers, if it lifts super easily, then you run the risk of it blending in with another layer and getting a muddied look. So if you're trying to do like skin tones for a portrait, hot press is probably the best way to go because it looks like you're going to be able to layer on top without removing the previous layer. So not good if you're making mistakes, but really good if you know what you're doing and want to keep that layering. And one other thing to note, out of these three, the textures or the tooth of the paper looks relatively unchanged from lifting. I'm not sure if you can tell from the camera, but this guy is a little rougher here. So some of the particles of the paper are already starting to ball up, which means that if I were to go over this again or have to lift again, it's just not holding up quite as well. And whenever the paper balls up, then it gets absorbed differently. It adds new lines of texture that may not work with your shadowing. So just something that I noticed that is part of probably why these guys are considered professional and these guys are considered beginner. Maybe that's also why it erases so well, because if you're a beginner, you want to be able to erase. The very last test that I'm going to do is I'm going to try a salt technique. So I'm just going to paint a little square down here, and I'm going to add some table salt to it. And we're just going to see if the effect looks different on each type of paper. I'm going to be as surprised as you to this. All right, the paint is dry, salt technique is done. Let's check it out. Canson, how cool is that? That is so neat looking. I love that. Amazon, not as cool, but still unique. Arches. This one I feel like is probably more because I think I put more salt over here in like a higher concentration, and so it pushed the paint this way. But that's kind of good to know. This is making me want to do like another video on salt techniques and how they can be varied. Let me know if you think that's a good idea in the comments. And last but not least, this one's my favorite. It's really neat looking. I think this has the most unique result compared to the rest because it is hot press and it does have a smoother surface. I really think this made a difference in this case with how that turned out. So what do you guys think? Does paper matter? Is it just cold press versus hot press? Or can you go cheap and get away with what you want to get away with? Or should you go expensive? I don't know. You tell me in the comments and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.